In this worksheet called Manipulating, we're seeing a pivot table based on data in the previous worksheet called Creating. When looking at the data, we imagined that maybe this presentation has run its course. We discussed the various sales levels and would like to consider some of the other presentation options using the data that's being reflected in our pivot table fields. We might want to see a breakout of which customers are buying which products. We may not want to see a salesperson here. So a few options: we can drag the word salesperson out of this panel and uncheck the box for salesperson. The pivot table has a different look, but we will see the word customer in the rows area. If you click the box for the text field, it will automatically appear in the rows area. We could drag it there, but you could just click the box for customer and we see a list of our customers in alphabetical order. We still see the same totals as before, but now we're seeing a different layout of the data. We have this quick ability to redisplay the information. The word pivot comes from the concept that sometimes when you're viewing the data, you might want to have those fields across row 4 maybe. You may want to have those appear down the left-hand side. We have the customer names in row 4, so the word pivot implies we're pivoting this data from the upper left-hand corner. This doesn't reflect a single action, it means changing the positions of those two fields. So in the pivot table field list, we're going to drag product into the rows area and then customer into the columns area. I will use the pause after I drag product into the rows area. It could be that you want to consider printing the list on the left in that layout format. We'll drag customer into columns. This may or may not be a better layout. It could be that you're trying to make this layout reflect something you've done previously. It's easy to check the positioning of these fields. They're not limited just to fields. It may be that we want to see a breakout here by region. We'll click the box for region and it will go into the rows area. Now we see regions as well as products, and we're viewing the data like this. It's not as compact as before. It's probably not ideal for a live presentation, but it's also not that much info for the printed page. And we see another way to group the data. In the pivot table field, list product appears above region. In the actual pivot table, it appears to the left of region. Now, what if we flipped it? Drag product downward and watch the display on the left and we see it grouped by region. You may have this idea of how this is going to look better. Sometimes how it will look in a presentation or on the printed page, or maybe you're just analysing the data yourself. Different ways to group the information, and we're not worried that we may be altering our original data. The pivot table was distinct and separate from the source data. Let's simplify this list again by removing region. Another placement here for a field can be the area called filters. So as I drag region into the filters area, here, watch the pivot table. We now see region appear, and we may even want to see different regions. So click the drop arrow and use it like a filter. See all of them, select multiple items, click one, and we're just looking at Southeast data here. Sometimes you put the field in the filters area just to move it away momentarily and return to it later. What if we make a change to the original data? The source data here is in a sheet called Creating. Our total here is 7997. So when we go back to the original data, it seems that one of the entries was incorrect. 12 items were actually sold. Before we change it to 12, we'll go back to the manipulating sheet and remind ourselves the grand total was 7997. If we increase the items by 3, this will go up to 8000. So we're concerned with the item which is Captain Recliner. So back to the pivot table again. We have 1403 Captain Recliners. So we'll add 3 to the list, change 9 to 12, go to the pivot table in the next sheet, and nothing's happened. It's still 7997, and this is still 1403. When you work with Excel, you learn very early on that formulas react to changes in sales, charts react to changes in source data. But in pivot tables, you have to refresh the pivot table to make them up to date. So clicking within the pivot table and using the keystroke shortcut Alt F5, or go to the Analyze button and choose Refresh. Now the data is refreshed. The 1403 is now 1406, and the total is now 8000. You have to be constantly aware of the idea as you work with pivot table data. Making changes to your source data does not change the pivot table. You have to make changes yourself by pressing Refresh.